So now, earlier on, I had the pleasure of sitting down with the Chancellor to find out what's going to be in Wednesday's budget and how he's going to emulate Nigel Lawson's economic boom. Joining me now in the studio is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Chancellor, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for coming in. I think it's your first appearance with me on GB News, so it's great to have you.
The first one in the studio.
Indeed so, yes. We've done down-the-line interviews. Can we start, just before we get on to the budget, to talk about Rishi Sunak's speech on Friday outside Downing Street? He talked a lot about the current situation with extremism. Obviously, he was reacting to the election of George Galloway in Rochdale. I felt that it was a good commentary, but there weren't very many action points in there. Is the government all talk and no action on extremism? What measures are you going to introduce to try and stop this?
No, he was clear that there are things the government needs to do. What he was really saying is that we have a traditional British virtue of tolerance. And what we've seen in the last few months is a line being crossed with protests that are intimidatory, that have led to some people feeling it's not safe to go out of their homes when they're going on. That is not the British way. He said the government will legislate to ban intimidatory marches, give the police the powers they need to stop them.
Yes.
But he's also said that there's a responsibility on all of us. And he pointed out the vast majority of people on these protests want to protest peacefully.
Yes.
They too have a responsibility to call out extremism when it happens.
But weren't people watching that speech and thinking, it's great, you've identified the problems, but what are the solutions? I mean, people are saying, in fact, James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, has said, you know, you've made your point with the marches now, just stop them. Why doesn't the government stop them? We had Suella Braverman in the studio a few weeks ago saying the police have got the powers, they're just not using them. So why not stop the marches now? Because unfortunately they have been hijacked by a small minority.
Well, we have asked the police to use the powers they have. As I said, we've also said that we will legislate to give them additional powers. We've said that we will expel people who cross that line if they are foreign nationals, and we will prescribe organisations that promote that kind of behaviour, like Hizb ut-Tahrir. But we are also very clear, this is about our whole country. This is not just something for the government. This is about restoring that traditional British virtue of tolerance, that understanding that the way you get change in this country is through peaceful protest within the law. But if those protests are within the law, of course, we will always support people's right to do them.
I mean, you've been a politician for a long time. Do you feel more intimidated and threatened now than you have been in the past?
Well, I actually live in Downing Street now, so I hear those protests often at the weekend. Personally, I would never say that I'm worried, but I have had very disturbing emails, particularly from Jewish friends,
yes,
who say that some of this behaviour makes them frightened to go out of their front door. And that is not the Britain that I want, or I think anyone wants, and that's why it's right to take action.
Let's talk about the economic Britain that you want. Obviously, the budget, there's a lot of pressure on you on Wednesday to deliver. Many people are saying this is last chance saloon for the Tories. Do you recognise that this budget could be make or break when it comes to the next general election?
Of course, budgets are very, very important moments. This is likely to be the last budget before the general election. But British people are very smart. They recognise gimmicks. They don't want any tricks. What they will get on Wednesday is a prudent and responsible plan for long-term growth.
I mean, do they want prudence, Mr Hunt? At the same time, they do recognise that the tax burden is the highest it's been in 70 years. They're desperate for some relief. They want to keep more of the money that they earn. We hear in the papers that there's a debate going on between a 1p or 2p income tax cut. Can you confirm here this morning that there will be an income tax cut?
You know, Camilla, how this works, and chancellors don't reveal the contents of their budgets, even on GB News, however amazing the interviewer is.
But are you confident there's fiscal headroom for a tax cut in theory?
Well, let me answer the questions you asked. So, first of all, prudence. There is nothing less conservative than funding tax cuts by increasing borrowing.
But there's nothing less conservative than having a tax rate in the highest region that it has been in peacetime. That's unconservative, isn't it?
Well, let me answer. This is a bit like that sort of Two Ronnies sketch where I'm going to answer the question before last. But I'll just say, first of all, that I do want to bring taxes down. Absolutely. They're too high. And why do I want to bring them down? Because I look around the world and the most dynamic, fastest growing economies in North America and Asia are generally countries where the tax burden is lower. So yes, I want to bring them down. Why have they gone up? Because we spent nearly £500 billion supporting families in the pandemic and in the cost of living crisis. That was the right thing to do. Because of that, unemployment is at historic lows, and I think we did the right thing there. It has to be paid for. Now we need to get back on a path to lower taxes. I will do that in a responsible way. I hope to show progress, but this is not something that is going to happen overnight. But
so you're really managing expectations here. That's the vibe I'm getting from you, because at the beginning of the year you were channeling your inner Nigel Lawson and you were pitch-rolling tax cuts because I think you thought you had 30 billion of fiscal headroom. The OBR has turned around and said you've actually got 12.8 billion, but then some of your colleagues question the reliance on the OBR forecast when they often prove to be too gloomy and wrong. Why is the OBR now dictating what should be in your budget rather than just providing some advice on the sidelines? Are you kind of entrapped by what the OBR is telling you?
Well, it was a Conservative government that set up the OBR in 2010. And the reason that we set it up was because people worried that when Gordon Brown was doing his budgets under the previous Labour government, chancellors were cooking the books. They were giving forecasts that gave an unduly rosy picture of the situation. And people wanted to have confidence that what a chancellor said, the figures that a chancellor announced, have been independently verified.
But there's independent verification and then there's actually dictating what should be in your budget, isn't it?
Well, all the OBR does is tell the country independently whether I am meeting the fiscal rules that I myself have chosen.
But what if the OBR is wrong, as it has been historically many years over?
Well, in fairness to the OBR, they are, of course, they've made mistakes in their forecasts, but they are more accurate than the forecast that the Treasury used to do when we didn't have an OBR, and they are broadly in line with other forecasters. But look, I don't say that, there aren't things that you can improve in the systems that we have, but fundamentally what people at home want to know is that when you cut taxes, it's forever.
OK.
And that's why we want to go on this path to lower taxes. But we want to do so in a way that is credible, sustainable, and people know is responsible. OK. You're talking as well about cutting Whitehall waste. I mean, GBNews viewers and listeners could be forgiven for saying to themselves, what, again? I mean, how many times has the government announced that it's going to cut Whitehall waste? The trouble is that this Whitehall waste is built up on your watch. It's built up over the course of the last 14 years. So you're having to unravel things that you're responsible for. No, I don't think that's fair, Camilla.
Well, Whitehall staffing has gone up since pre-pandemic, and indeed the cost of Whitehall has gone up. The cost of government spending is higher than it was. Yes, but that is since the pandemic, and that's what I want to do. I want to bring the numbers of civil servants down to the level that they were before the pandemic. Between 2010 and 2019, we saw sustained increases in public sector productivity. Over that period, by the way, standards in our schools went up. Crime went down. We had more doctors and nurses in the NHS treating more people than ever before. The pandemic stopped that. And what I'm saying in the budget on Wednesday is I want to restart the process of public sector reform, because public sector productivity is 6% lower than pre-pandemic. And it is wrong to say that we should be putting more money into the public sector. So you want fewer civil servants to be more productive? Correct. You want fewer people to do more? I think we've got to stop always looking at the inputs and always saying that the way to get better public services is to spend more, and actually ask if we could be more efficient. And one of the ways that I think would be of particular interest to GBNews viewers is knife crime. Now, we've halved violent crime. We're very proud of the progress that's been made. But part of that is through these things called violence reduction units, which intervene with people who might be the kind of people who would commit a knife crime. They have prevented about 130,000 knife crimes and other crimes. So we're actually going to spend money to roll those out,
because we know that will save money down the line. That is the change in approach.
Are you going to be spending more money on defence?
Well, I have already spent more money on defence.
We've got Vladimir Putin is spending 7.5% of Russian GDP on defence. We're spending 2.2%. We need to spend more, don't we, with everything going on in the world?
Well, I do think going forward we will need to spend more money on defence, and we have said that as soon as it is possible to do so within our economic context, we'll increase that spending to 2.5% of GDP. But can I just say, Rishi Sunak, when he was doing my job as Chancellor, gave the defence sector the biggest sustained increase in funding since the Cold War.
I know, but yet the numbers are low, aren't they? We've got the smallest amount of troops since the Napoleonic Wars, so there's concerns about defence. Very briefly, because I know you're on limited time,
yes,
Mr. Hunt. Just on migration, there's been this theory, I think, that actually migration is inherently a good thing, that it's good for the economy, it's good to get more numbers in. But actually that's not quite true, is it? Because of the pressure on housing and indeed our public services. So should migration come down, and shouldn't you consider putting a cap on it as a Tory government?
I think migration in limited numbers can be beneficial. But what I think is wrong is this idea that you should get economic growth by allowing in more migrants. Why does the Treasury keep on
sort of being proponents of that theory then? The more people that come in, the higher the tax receipts. Why don't you put a stop to it? I mean, what was it, 745,000 last year, a record amount of immigrants coming into this country. Country can't cope with that many people.
Well, first of all, the Treasury is not a proponent of that. What we want to do is create a high-wage, high-skill economy that is not dependent on unlimited migration. Secondly, migration is too high, but it is because there were some very specific international factors.
But would there be a migration cap in the budget on Wednesday, perhaps?
Well, what is decided for the next Parliament will be a matter for the manifesto. But what we want to do, and what I'll be doing on Wednesday, is saying how do we move from an economy that has been dependent on migration for growth to a high-wage, high-skill economy that is not dependent on high levels of migration. And that is a profoundly different approach to the Labour Party. They have no strategy or no plan to control migration. We do. It's not been easy with the...
Although, may you be forced, if you have to hand over the reins of the Treasury to Rachel Reeves, to be leaving a note like Liam Bird did and say there's no money left?
I'm not planning to hand over any note to Rachel Reeves because I'm intending to win the next election. But what I would say is that look at the difficult decisions that I took a year ago as Chancellor to balance the books. When Labour had a financial crisis, did they take any difficult decisions before the 2010 election? No. And that's why they ran out of money.
Jeremy Hunt, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Camilla.